lesson you're going to learn about trig ratios. SOHCAHTOA is the phrase that students in the past used to use to memorize the ratios for sine, cosine, and tangent. That's no longer necessary because those ratios are provided for you. This relationship is sine. You'll see it abbreviated on the calculator as SIN. It is not pronounced as sin. This will be abbreviated as COS on your calculator, and it's pronounced cosine. On your calculator, you'll see this one represented with TAN, but we'll call that tangent. At times in this class and other classes, we'll use the Greek letter theta to represent unknown angles. On some of the worksheet, it'll just use letters. Copy down this triangle 3 different times. For the sine of theta, we're going to mark on the first triangle the opposite leg over your hypotenuse. On your second triangle, we're going to mark cosine of theta, which is your closest leg, called the adjacent leg, over the hypotenuse. On your third triangle, we're going to do tangent of theta, which deals with only the legs. Tangent is the opposite leg over the adjacent leg. We're going to find sine, cosine, and tangent just by writing a ratio. We will not use the calculator's special buttons of sine, cosine, and tangent to do that. We will be using the fraction button and reducing any that can be reduced. The first thing you need to do is copy down the triangle, large enough that we can write some stuff on it. I highly recommend that you always draw little theta man. I use the theta usually as its head, but in this point I've got him animated as a stick figure. Now the next thing you need to do is identify all of the sides of the triangle. The easiest one to do first is the hypotenuse. It's across from the right angle. Your closest leg is called the adjacent leg, and the furthest leg away is your opposite leg. Now it will be much easier for you to visualize sine being opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse, and tangent is the opposite over adjacent. All we're doing is writing the ratios. Nothing special getting typed in on our calculator. Let's try another example. So copy this triangle down large enough that you could write some information down. Draw theta man where the angle is, and let's identify the 3 sides of the triangle. The easiest one to do first is the hypotenuse because it's across from the right angle. Your adjacent is always the closest leg, and the opposite is the leg furthest from you. Now write your ratios for sine, cosine, and tangent. Next up, we're going to look at a sine, cosine, cofunction relationship. I need you to write this down in your notes. Pause the video if you need to. Now this kind of is math secret code for sine of one acute angle will be the same answer of cosine from the other acute angle. Let me say that again and talk about the bottom line on the screen. Cosine from one acute angle is the exact same ratio as sine of the other acute angle. Now up on the screen I do not have the tangent relationship. So those of you who listen to this will write this in your notes and get this. Tangent from one angle will be the reciprocal for the other angle. Copy this example down. What is sine of angle A? So if Stickman were to stand up there at angle A, I need the opposite over the hypotenuse. That's 30 over 34, and I can reduce that number. This is the only thing I need to use the calculator for, is to type in that fraction button, 30 over 34. Now it's asking me to go stand at the other acute angle, at C, and find cosine. So that's the adjacent from C, adjacent, it would be 30 over 34. So do you see that cosine of C is also going to be 15 over 17? Sine from one angle is the same thing as cosine of the other. Sine of Z, so go put Stickman where Z is, and sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so 24 over 26, and then reduce that in your calculator. Now it says, go stand at the other acute angle and tell me what cosine is. Well, that's easy. Sine of one angle is the same thing as cosine of the other, so the answer would be 12 over 13. Now there's no picture. What is sine of 28 the same thing as? Well, it's cosine of 90 minus theta. And in this example, my theta is 28. So 90 minus 28 is 62. Cosine of 10 is the same thing as sine of 80. Cosine of one angle is the same thing as sine of the other. So 90 minus 10. Now we need to figure out, well, what is sine of C? Well, remember, cosine from one angle is the same as sine as the other, so it's just 3/5. I actually didn't need a picture on that one to get my answer. Sine of what angle is equal to cosine of 15? So subtract from 90, and I get 75. This one is the one that you really need to draw the picture, where angle A is your right angle. Stand at angle B, and the opposite leg is 3, the hypotenuse is 5. How would I find the other side of my triangle? Well, you need to use Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So in this problem, A squared plus 3 squared equals 5 squared. So what's the length of AB? Now they want you to stand at angle C and find the opposite over the adjacent. In this picture, I want you to draw it and just label what they gave you. Draw a stick man where the 61-degree angle is. Label the 11, which is the farthest leg away from you, that's your opposite, and then label your hypotenuse, which is the x. Which ratio would be the opposite over the hypotenuse? And that's all we're going to do on that one. On the next lesson, you'll learn what to do to solve for x.